May 18th, 2020, Victoria Day in Canada. Uh, Bob, Willis, and I. Bob is the CEO of San Marco Resources. We're both Canadian, so we're both having a day off, but we decided to jump online and just have a little conversation about some of the changes at San Marco. There's been a couple of big ones in the last little while, of course. Uh, I think we need to start out with a little bit of background on your project, the Buck project, because it's one of those properties where it's been around for a while, but the whole point to San Marco's work on it since you picked it up, and you picked it up recently, was to kind of start almost from first principles. Uh, can you maybe explain to us why you guys took the approach that you've taken with Buck and sort of started from scratch almost with it?
Okay, Eric, thanks for having me this morning. Yeah, I guess on the Buck property, our first foray into Canada again was mid last year when our group decided to focus more on exploring in Canada rather than Mexico, where we had been for a number of years. And so we were scouring around looking for a project that we felt would have some serious legs to move forward. We came upon the Buck property, and I guess we negotiated a deal with the vendor where it's primarily shares in San Marco and modest cash payments over a 5-year deal. And we only got this project late last summer, early last fall, and one of the conditions for us was that we would need to consolidate our shares 3-for-1, which we did, resulting in just over 30 million shares outstanding last fall. So part of the allure of the Buck property to San Marco was a tremendous amount of exploration had been done on the property over a 50-60-year span, and by various companies, various geologists, a lot of work done in the 1980s, some in 1990s. And we got access to all of the drill logs, most of the assay sheets, etc. But there was some drill core around, but the condition of the core was basically stacked in the woods for many, many years, and it was unrecognizable as far as what holes it came from and what it was. So basically, we said, let's spend months and months compiling all the historical data on the Buck property, see what that means, and then roll back the clock and start from the beginning, start from scratch. So one of the key components of that was to get some fresh core. And so we moved very quickly on that. We got our permit to explore at Buck in mid-January of this year, 2020. So again, we moved very quickly and managed to drill just fine through the winter. And again, the key part was that we would get fresh core where we could relate mineralization that had been identified in some areas of the property in the past as to what it would mean for us moving forward. So really that was kind of a lot happened over a very short period of time for us to get to where we are today.
Well, one thing that I guess is probably important to point out is, like, as you noted, you got your 5-year exploration license in January. So essentially, by the time you could really get on the property, there was probably a meter of snow there. So your guys haven't really had a chance yet to take your sort of new target model and actually go and look at stuff. I mean, that's what you're about to do now, having done the drilling.
Yes, exactly, and it's a situation where we have a geological model in general terms, if you will. This property hasn't been totally pegged, if you will, of its origin. However, we have seen a lot of similarities to a project in Montana in the US called Montana Tunnels, a very similar type geology and mineralogy with the gold, silver, and zinc assemblage. And we've also seen some very, very specific similarities between the geology at the Blackwater deposit of New Golds, which is located about 100 kilometers to the southeast of Buck. Very, very similar geology between the two, which is identified in the feasibility study online at New Gold for Blackwater. So we kind of have recognized that the Buck property has a very, very large mineralized system. And that's been identified not only through historic drilling, but also through surface footprints. So what our mandate is now is we've got our geoscience team is remodeling, if you will, and doing a 3D model of what we see of our new system, where it's vectoring, where it's going, and that will guide us to our next round of drilling. So we expect to have our geological team on site in about 3 weeks. And again, they need to go and look at the surface outcrops, although there's very little of those. Less than 10% of the property has outcrop. And also not only look in and around where we've drilled, but we've recognized other targets within this property that's in excess of 100 square kilometers that we also this summer want to go and look at and identify, the significance.
I'm going to throw up a screen share here that'll have the. Okay, this is a screen share that you should all be able to see at home, and this is essentially the entire Buck property. I think it's mag that's basically the background you can see here.
Yeah.
The solid circle is where San Marco just drilled some holes. The dotted circles are a selection of other exploration targets. I think there's actually more than this, but those are the ones you chose to highlight on this map. Can you speak a little bit to the drilling that you just did, and then we'll maybe touch on why you want to look in these other areas? What is it that makes those areas targets?
Right. Now, in our current drilling, we've confirmed that there are a number of styles of mineralization in the area where we drilled. We also recognize from historical exploration that there's similar styles of mineralization, from disseminated gold, silver to higher grade vein type to massive brecciation with infill mineralization around the class. And one of the key styles is I would call it in a tooth, which is like a sponge. And so this rock is highly, highly porous like a sponge. And when the solutions were oozing up through the earth, if you will, it just sort of soaked up in the sponge. We see similar rock types in the areas that we do have circled with the dotted lines as well on the property through historical work. So it's very exciting that we not only have a highly prospective area where we've drilled to continue drilling, but also to really look at some of these other targets, because we believe that this is a district. It's not just one specific target.
Okay, and can you? I don't know if you get it in front of us. I don't know if you want to give us a couple of highlights from the drilling you just completed. I know the point to that drilling was in large part just to get fresh core. You guys had come up with this affinity, this breccia model, but because you didn't have any historic core that wasn't in horrible condition, the only way to really verify it was to drill these holes, have new core to log. And I know from speaking after those results came out, that was a success. You did in fact see the sort of things you expected to see. You got some pretty good intercepts, especially at today's gold prices. But I think it's important for people to realize that I think you started where you did because that was an area where you did have some comfort you were going to intercept the right rock type and intercept the brecciation. But there's plenty of other targets. There's no particular reason to think that's the best place to drill grade wise. That was simply logistically and based on data that you had, that was the obvious place to start with a meter of snow in January.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the key for us is that, we have up to, 200 meters of, plus half gram AUEQ, and, subsets of, 30 to 40 meters of, a gram AUEQ. And what is important in this style of mineralization is the consistency of the gold. So we see, these 150 meters and 127 meter intervals that's in our news release of continuous gold. And one would expect that if this model of this brecciated model plus the mineralized tuffs is true. Now that we can see the core and relate that to grade and see what is running a certain grade, what is running a higher grade, then we can parlay that knowledge into some of these, not only other areas within a kilometer or two of where we've drilled, but also in these other areas within the property that we've talked about. So it's very, very valuable knowledge. The key is we can now see core, see the rock type down 100, 200 meters down, and what is carrying gold, as opposed to trying to decipher that from historical logs, where that's become very, very difficult with numerous different folks logging. And there's a lot of abbreviations and various notes in these logs, but there's no legend. We don't know what that means. So, again, getting back to our original comment, we're basically starting from scratch, but using a tremendous amount of historical knowledge to really catapult us.
Okay, and you've got a crew or crews or whatever going in here again pretty soon. I mean, around month end, I think you said you thought you'd be back there.
Yeah, I mean, based on the health rules in BC, it appears as though we're able to be on site in about 3 weeks. So we're targeting the 1st of June. And again, at the Buck property, we can drive there in vehicles. It does not need helicopter support or aircraft support. It's a 20-minute drive south of a resource town, Houston, BC, which has been a support hub for several past producing mines in the area. So, we have a good base to work from. And again, it's only a 20-minute drive to the property, where the drilling occurred anyway, a little further when we go south. But so logistics is great. And we do expect to have, as we say, a crew on that in about 3 weeks. And so we'll have some news coming off the property over June, July, with an expectation that we will be planning our next drill phase from results of that work.
Okay, so the idea, yeah, you already know. I mean, you and I talked about this. You already know you probably want to do some step out in the area where you just drill these holes, but the expectation is you're probably going to be throwing some holes at some brand new targets on the property as well. That's
Exactly.
How you think it'll go. Okay.
Yes. There's.
The other thing I want to touch on.
I was going to say
Yeah. Go ahead.
The footprint, the footprint stepping out from where we drilled, if you will, the surface footprint of the gold anomaly there, which includes historical drilling, several hundred meters in different directions, gives us a great opportunity to expand out from where we drilled, which can really, really add size to this right in that area.
Yeah, so I just changed the screen share so that the people watching can see this, what you guys call the added zone and the horseshoe zone. So this red shaded area, that's essentially based on where, looking at historical mapping or historical core, you guys have indications of this brecciated zone. That's basically what this area is.
Right. So if we look at the horseshoe zone, we can see the 3 blue traces of drill holes. We look at the added zone, there was 2 traces of short drill holes we did in this program in search of a previously postulated fault in that area. It appears as though it's not, which is good information for us going forward. But what's key is, if you look within the yellow oval adit zone, there's two white dots sort of the top of it. Those are historical holes that are drilled to the top right of the screen, like toward the word San Marco, that each have intersected mineralized breccia, gold, silver. Same style as what we see in our current drilling. Go further to the top center of the slide, we see three additional white dots. Those are some shorter holes we believe were drilled in 1945. And there is gold and silver in all of those holes. We don't have a lot of detailed logs about what style of mineralization is there, but there is mineralization there. So let's just take, looking at the scale on the bottom left of this slide, let's just take from where we drilled our three main holes and go to the two white dots in the adit zone. That's 400 meters right there. So, you know, scale-wise on this property, you know, there's a lot of work to do right in this particular area. The other area I'd like to point out is the third yellow oval on the to the left center, with a number of white dots in there. There, again, this is an area where our 3D modeling needs to take place first before we go back and drill in this area. There are some holes in this area that have, you know, 30 to 40 meters of very near surface, at surface, of very good gold grade, and there is some trenching in the area as well. We'd like to reopen those trenches. There's multi-gram gold in these trenches in historical work. So again, we didn't drill in this area to start with because we just didn't know the tenor of the mineralization and the orientation. And that's why we started off in the horseshoe zone. Now we have comfort of the style and what we're going to chase. So we can see just between these three yellow ovals in this slide, you know, an area of 500-600 meters in any direction. So that's a real good start for scale to this property right in this area, excluding these new zones that we saw on the previous slide.
Okay, well, that's, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big target. I mean, it's kind of what got my attention when you first picked it up. One thing I think is, well, one thing worth noting, and like you said, you're gonna have to go in and open up the trenches and try to figure out what's different about the mineralization where these trenches were done decades ago. But there are, although bulk tonnage is the obvious target, I suppose, there are in fact some occurrences on the property and some historic indication that there's also narrower, much higher grade zones. So this is
right.
maybe a project where it's going to be you know, pick your poison, decide whether you want to go up high grade or low grade depending on where you are in the property. And I know a lot of people that I've talked to since you put out the drill results, and some people even before that, but there have been, you know, some technical guys I've talked to, if you will, they've definitely drawn comparisons between this and the Blackwater project, which is 100 kilometers, give or take, to the southeast of Buck.
Right.
Can you make a couple of comments about, I mean, what does Blackwater look like in terms of the average grade and stuff? Does it kind of make sense as a comparison?
Well, I think geologically it does. You know, again, Blackwater, you know, all this information taken from the New Gold website, but, you know, has north of 300 million tons of 0.73, I believe it is, or 74 grams per ton gold. Equates to in excess of 8 million ounces of gold. Has a very large area, about 1,000 meters, I think, in one direction and 300, 400 another direction. But I think that, you know, one of the similarities is the scale. And again, on Buck, the potential scale, I should say, as well. The mineralogy, for example, if one reads the geology section in the Blackwater feasibility, we see that, you know, the bulk of their mineralization in their resources is hosted in felsic volcanics, heterolithic breccias and tuffs, and all of the rocks are pyrite slash sphalerite mineralization. Those three things I just mentioned, we see identical combination at the Buck. The age of the rocks is very, very similar. So the structural regime at Blackwater is northwest southeast. The structural regime in the slide we're currently looking at is to the northwest to the adit zone, southeast down to the horseshoe zone. We see some sort of regional fabric that's very similar, plus some specific mineralogy as well. So again, the similarity on geology is just that. The number of items I just mentioned, but really it's the scale, the potential scale of Buck in comparison to the Blackwater. And I should mention that we've talked about at Buck, you know, some of bulk tonnage style slash grade that we see. And we also see areas of higher grade, which could be underground as well. So, I mean, I think as far as picking our poison, it could be both, all of the above. And I think at the Blackwater, looking at some of their drill intercepts, whether it's mined underground or not, but it would appear as though there's some, you know, higher grade zones as well. And the other key thing at Blackwater is they have structural intersections, again, according to their feasibility, where they have, like, we call them chutes that are, you know, tens of meters in each direction of much higher grade material. And we think that we see that evolving. If even in this limited drilling we've done, we see, you know, structural, at least 3 different orientations of structure. And again, this 3D modeling that's ongoing will help us to identify structural intercepts where there's just, you know, the solutions have just congregated for higher grade. So that is something that I think is a real possibility for Buck as well.
Well, I think it's worth noting too. I mean, assuming, you know, like you said, things could go either way or maybe both, but assuming things go the bulk tonnage route, I think it's important to point out that, well, Blackwater in the sort of really big picture sense isn't that far away. It's about 100, 120 kilometers away. Buck has far, far superior logistics. I mean, I think one of the hurdles that Blackwater has is, although it's in, you know, central BC, it doesn't have great logistics. I mean, it's pretty far out in the boonies. There's really nothing there. It's kind of out by itself, as opposed to you, where you've got like main haulage and main roads basically running through the property and stuff. They would have to do quite a bit of, I think, quite a bit of infrastructure to actually get that thing going, right?
Yeah, that's what I understand. And I think, you know, like I believe it's contemplated for a camp situation as well. So, and you're right, for us, we have power and rail and, you know, main highways, roads, and again, a resource-based town, you know, a 20-minute drive. So yeah, our logistics are very good.
And one final point I want to make is, you know, as always happens, I mean, this is how traders trade. It wasn't that shocking. The news came out. The results were pretty good. My sense in the 2 or 3 days following those polls coming out, and I think this was substantiated after I talked to you, because I know this question came up again and again and again and again, which was, when are you going to do the next financing, Bob? And it's fairly common for traders in this situation, even if they like the story, to basically offer some stock in the market on the assumption they can turn around and replace it in a near-term placement. Well, as it turns out, you did announce a placement on Friday, but it's not a placement that has many placees, and it's not a placement. When I talked to you Friday, you were pretty adamant that it also is not a placement anyone else is going to be invited into. Can you give us a bit of information on that placement that got announced on Friday?
Sure. After our drilling results were out, and you know, one of our mandates in our company was to try and get new eyes on our company, and some new eyes, and so we had discussions with a number of groups that called us, and we had reached out to others, and just to talk about the Buck property, not just about the drill results, but what they really meant to us going forward. And so I guess there was a group that evolved that felt that yes, we're early days, starting from scratch, if you will, but the results that we disclosed were just fine and would support an investment that they've made. So I don't want to get into anything further than that, but it was a situation that evolved very quickly on a recognition by a group that has some, in my opinion, some good technical people, and there was obviously it was looked at by those, and so we felt that this is a very strategic investment by this group, and it was just for this group, and so therefore it kind of, as we talked about, eliminated kind of the wonderment about doing a placement, if we are, what terms, et cetera, et cetera. So it was done, and it now gives us sufficient funds to not only complete the boots on the ground work we've talked about, but to engage in a few thousand meters of drilling on our next campaign. So I think we're set to go there, and we are continuing though to discuss with not only current shareholders but new groups have put their hand up, if you will, and said we'd like to have a chat, and we will continue to do that. Where that leads, I don't know, but right now we're fine to get going on our next drill program.
Yeah, and Bob's being a little bit coy here, but I think it's worth mentioning that the new investor is the Augusta Group. That name may not be familiar to you. The main person behind that group is probably more familiar. Richard Wark is the founder and the biggest shareholder, the driving force behind Augusta Group. Most of you will probably be familiar with Richard, or you should be if you're not. One of his recent successes was Arizona Mining, which was a $2 billion plus takeover. But he was also kind of the driving force behind Rosemont. He was the driving force behind Ventana. Essentially, this is one of the most successful investment development groups in the sector. They've been responsible for over $4 billion in takeovers in the last 10 years. So this is a group a lot of people pay attention to, and not too surprisingly, a lot of people that maybe hadn't looked at San Marco before decided they should suddenly pay attention. And I personally, as someone who's already a shareholder, I kind of like the fact that Augusta is coming in and doing a $700,000 placement, and it's not really being opened up to anybody else. Nor does Bob need to. I think it's worth noting, and this feeds into the whole positive logistics thing. As Bob's pointed out to me more than once, your drill costs are impressively low on this project. I mean, you seem to be able to drill quite cheaply at Buck. The cost estimate you quoted to me is quite low. I think you're under 200 a meter, and that's all in. That's geos, that's assays, that's everything. That's pretty cheap these days.
Yeah, we're well under the 200, and so and that is we expect that will be similar costs going forward, and we have a local drill contractor who's very supportive of our project, and there are drills ready for us whenever we want to get going again. So so it's we can get a lot done for not a lot of money.
Okay, I mean, I think that's enough detail for today. I mean, the company is San Marco. The symbol is SMN on the venture. It's a fairly tight deal, as Bob mentioned near the start. I mean, they did do a consolidation when they were picking up Buck. It was part of the deal. So the company's got like 30 and change million shares out. Market cap is still under 10 million. To me, with some decent first stage drill results work starting right away, and not unimportantly, a very well-known group suddenly rearing its head and writing some checks. I think San Marco is going to get a lot more attention to this summer. It's a really good looking story that I think people are probably going to gravitate to. So I think you want to get it on your screen, start paying attention, go through the presentation. Bob's really good about answering questions and explaining the technical stuff. If you see something you like and you want to contact the company. Thanks for Bob and I are friends, but still, it was nice of you to it was nice of you to come on a holiday Monday, and we had a few technical difficulties. That's why our screens probably look a little weird. We had some hardware issues. Let's put it that way. We had to go through a few bits of hardware before we got one that would work properly. But all's well that ends well. Thanks for coming by and sharing the details with us today, Bob.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having us, and look forward to news coming forward over the summer.
Sounds good to me.